Americans for Prosperity is committed to breaking barriers across the country, and Americans for Prosperity is growing across North Dakota. By calling on lawmakers to reduce taxes, spend less, improve health care, and provide second chances, we can empower all North Dakotans to rise. We're fighting for you. Join us today so we can make North Dakota the best state to live, work, and raise a family. Americans for Prosperity paid for this ad. State Representative Steve Vetter is a Republican. He's from District 18. That's in the Grand Forks area. For those of you who aren't from the Grand Forks area, Steve was first elected in 2016. And I wanted to have him on because I'm kind of watching some of these legislative districts, like District 18 in Grand Forks, like District 42, frankly, in Grand Forks as well. They're districts that historically have been either blue or purple. Not many of those in North Dakota, but they do exist. That were taken over by Republicans, and sometimes not entirely taken over, but places where Republicans made progress, made inroads into Democratic-controlled areas in 2016. In 2016, I think a lot of people attributed that to being part of the Trump wave. I think a lot of it also had to do with the fact that North Dakota Democrats were stuck running on a ballot with somebody in Hillary Clinton, who was deeply unpopular here. And so the question now is, can those districts be held? Because this is kind of the first test since Republicans took them over. So District 18 is one of them. Currently has two Republicans elected there. Mr. Vetter, who we'll talk to in a moment, also State Senator Scott Meyer. There's also a State Representative Corey Mock, who is the Democrat elected from that district, also in the House. Mr. Vetter, how are you?
Hey, pretty good. Thanks.
So I guess that's my first question to you is how I've always thought of District 18 as being a very liberal district. The dearly departed Elliot Glassheim, who I considered to be a friend. I loved the man. I thought he was just a wonderful, wonderful human being. I think he would agree if he was around and could talk to us. He would agree that his politics were pretty far to the left, particularly if we're grading on the North Dakota scale. And so I always looked at District 18 and thought, that's a pretty liberal district by North Dakota standards, and yet you won there in 2016. How did you do that, and how do you convince the voters there to send Republicans back to the legislature again for another 4 years?
Well, first of all, I don't know necessarily it's essentially, when you classify it as a liberal district, I would more classify it as more of a blue-collar district, actually. And myself, personally, I'm kind of a blue-collar Republican to a certain point. And that's kind of why I fit into, I think, a little bit of why I fit into the district a little better. I kind of got my career essentially when I got out of high school, and I poured concrete for a number of years. I was actually a union cement finisher. I was a vested journeyman, and I up in Minneapolis, St. Paul area, and so I'm actually the only, I believe, one of two people in the legislature that are going to get a pension, a union pension when they were at 65 or so, and so versus and actually I'm a Republican, so but on the same sense, I'm for the worker and all that stuff, but at the same time, I'm also, for business and business growth. And, I'm on the other end of the spectrum too, where I then worked as a financial planner for, about a decade. And then when I moved back to my hometown here in Grand Forks in about 2012, I became an appraiser, and now I'm a certified residential appraiser, and I work in this area, so it's I get to see people when I do inspections and all that stuff, and sometimes in my district, I guess, and it's I don't know, I guess I have a little bit I'm maybe of a slightly different mold. I'm still a Republican, but I'm I guess maybe the best way to describe it would be a blue collar Republican. That's pretty much, I think, a big reason why I fit into our district. And and another thing about that is I actually the second part of your question is how do I remain there? Well, I came into office, and I think I've proven that I'm able to get things done. And if you're a Democrat out there, and there's going to be a lot of things that you probably agree with me on, and I'm going to be able to get those things done for you, whereas the Democrat might not be able to get those things done because there's a lot of Republicans in Bismarck, and sometimes it takes a Republican to win them over. So that's, and I could go through a few examples of that, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's talk about that. I mean, the reason I wanted to ask it is obviously we live in a time where nationally, I mean, we're very polarized, and those labels, progressive or liberal or conservative or libertarian or right-leaning or left-leaning, Republican, Democrat, they matter to people right now. We're very so it's really interesting to see you saying, hey, listen, my appeal kind of transcends partisan lines because it's very pragmatic. I have a lot of different life experiences, a lot across sort of a spectrum of professions and industries, and also, pragmatically, I'm somebody who can just get things done for Grand Forks. You don't hear a lot about that today. I mean, in today's politics, it's a lot about sort of team spirit. I'm Republican, and if I'm Republican, I can't support Democrats, and vice versa. And you're saying that you've been able to find success in District 18 by basically kind of just focusing on pragmatism? I mean, is that the right way to put it?
Well, yeah. I mean, in the point of, as far as getting things done, a couple examples. Like one example was I got a bill done. It was a military retiree exemption bill, and it was something actually that was proposed every session for the last 20 years, right? A form of that bill essentially was proposed. I know the exact bill, I want to say like a decade, but a form of that bill essentially has been proposed for 20 years, and every year what happened, it would fail, and so I took a look at it, and I was like, well, how does this failing? And I looked at it and I said, there's a process, a fiscal note, and it would go through tax and finance essentially, and they would give it a do not pass and go to the floor and get killed. And then every year people would just kind of give up on it, I think. And, I took a look at it and I said, you know what? I think this can be done. I came back my next session and I went to work, and how I did it is I went and built coalitions, just something you were just talking about, being polarized or whatever. Well, one of the things I did is I went to, even though it's a smaller caucus in my, we have 15 Democrats out of 94. So it's a smaller caucus, but I went to the Democrat caucus and I said, to a number of the people, and I said, was this something you guys could, and I got actually, I believe, 2 Democrats to sign on to the bill, in essence, to kind of make it bipartisan and get, the bill only passed by 2 votes. So, I mean, ultimately it was, then the other problem is then it goes through appropriations. Appropriation says, no, $3 million, that's too much money. Sorry. And, but I continuously pointed out the economic benefit of the bill, because it costs on average about $550 per retiree. And each retiree that stayed in our state would probably bring in somewhere around $4,000 to $6,000 in revenue. And so it was like, hey, I can show you that actually our state this is a money maker. It's not, it's not a cost, even though that's the way they want to talk about it. So that, I got that passed. And so it was another way where I've kind of showed that, hey, I can step in and get something done. I can work with Democrats. I can work with, all the different groups of Republicans. A lot of people say, hey, there's 79 Republicans in the House, but they don't necessarily all work together.
Yeah. Well, I'm fond of when I talk to people from out of state about North Dakota politics, I always say you got to remember the ideological divide in North Dakota is within the Republican Party. I mean, it's not a bunch of it's not a supermajority marching in lockstep. There is a lot of disagreement, between the executive branch Republicans and legislative Republicans, Senate Republicans and House Republicans, and then even within that, there's different factions and different points of view. And honestly, I think it's all great, and it's interesting to hear you talk, because this what you passed in terms of the veterans. Sort of exempting some of their revenue from pensions or whatever from taxes. I think a lot of people think, well, North Dakota income taxes, they're not very high to begin with. Maybe that's not a whole lot of money, but it's what's a whole lot of money to you might be a whole lot of money to somebody else, but also money's money. But also B, this helped with base retention, right? I mean, because they go through and they score based on, how friendly are where our bases are, how friendly are the policies for our troops, for our personnel that we're going to be bringing into these bases. They score on that. They scrutinize this policy, and that's part of, when they're deciding where the bases are going to go, that's part of the decision. So in a lot of ways, you also helped, make the case that for Grand Forks Air Force Base to stay there, which, there's talk of some cuts. There's talks of maybe the drone mission at Grand Forks getting cut or what have you. That's a big question mark right now, but something like your policy helps when we're trying to make that argument.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And what we're actually doing as the legislators, we're saying this bill, and along with there was my running mate, Senator Scott Meyer, his reciprocity bill, that along with that, basically we're telling the Department of Defense, we're saying, hey, we're military friendly, and our legislator is. We're working to actually pass bills to make it more military friendly. And so it kind of shows that, hey, we're working with you, and we're trying to pass these bills, because we were one of, I want to say 7 or 8 states that didn't have any kind of exemption. So it was kind of it's like, why are we have 2 bases? I thought it was a no-brainer. I tried to look at it from different arguments. With the argument you're saying, it's a great argument for Grand Forks. Unfortunately, the rest of the state, they might not necessarily care how great of a deal that is for us, but you're exactly right.
Well, they should, because those bases, I live in Minot. We have the Minot Air Force Base, and it's not just the Minot Air Force Base doesn't just impact Minot. It's a regional impact. It really is, and I'm certain the Grand Forks Air Force Base is the same. So that impacts a lot bigger than just Grand Forks, just District 18. And your running mate Scott Meyer also was involved in occupational licensing for trailing spouses, which again is a similar argument. It's basically reciprocity. If you're a licensed, I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good example now, and I'm completely blanking. But if you're licensed in an occupation in another state,
like a
cosmetology or something, right? The libertarian in me wonders why we got to license people to cut hair, but okay, whatever. Different subject for different podcasts, maybe. But if you follow your spouse into North Dakota, and they're obviously assigned to the Grand Forks Air Force Base or Minot Air Force Base, and you could essentially say, hey, I'm already licensed to cut hair in Ohio. Let me just fill out a form and just bring that license over here to North Dakota. Because if Ohio says I'm qualified to cut hair, I should be qualified to cut hair in North Dakota too. And really, again, another way in which we make it easier for troops to move here, to work here, maybe decide to continue living here after their military service is up, which would be a wonderful thing. It's just a good thing all the way around.
Yeah, I definitely. I mean, I don't know what more to say on that,
yeah,
but it definitely it's something that we need to do for our community. And it's almost like now, as they're coming out with this thing of it's more of this, hey, what are we going the more of the scare kind of things coming out now. Well, now at least we're showing, hey, look at us as a state, we're pushing to have a more favorable military policy. Like another one to go right along with that. I don't know if next session is the right time or whatever, but I think sometime down the road, I would definitely be in favor of maybe exempting active duty pay. And the reason for that is if you really look at these guys that come in to the bases, you're probably aware of this, how many of them actually are North Dakota residents? Do they have a North Dakota license? A lot I found, which was kind of, well, not amazing, but it was just kind of a little bit shocking, is just being in our district, how many actually people vote from, because the bases in the Grand Forks Air Force Base is in my district, how many of those people actually vote? And it's really, really small. And the reason is because they're like, hey, I'll get a South Dakota license. I'll get this state or that
Right.
state, because I don't want to have to pay state taxes on my income. Why not? And so, and one of the arguments I made with my retiree thing,
we did that, by the way, from the state of Alaska. I mean, my dad continued to work in the state of Alaska after we moved to North Dakota. I was born in Alaska. We moved here about 1990. And my dad, we continued to get our vehicles registered in Alaska, and he held on to that Alaska residency for as long as he legally could, because Alaska, there were some tax advantages. You know, people do that. They make that decision.
You know, and see, then what the other thing is the kind of hidden benefit there is, even if you, because they'll say from the state, oh, we're going to give up, because that, I believe the fiscal note on that was right around $5 million, right? If we just decided to, as of right the last session, if we just decided, hey, I want to get rid of active duty, taxes on their active duty pay, people are like, oh, that's going to cost a whole bunch of money and all that stuff. But the thing is, the hidden things is, look at the amount of federal money now we get because now they're North Dakota residents, and then with the census, now the census has kind of came and, it's not going to happen for now, but for actually counting us as far as citizens. And, for North Dakota, that's also a benefit. So I haven't worked out all the numbers yet, but I think to a certain point, if we could show a benefit of where at least we're breaking even or making money, I don't see why that wouldn't be something to say, why don't we, promote these people to become North Dakota citizens rather than every other state.
Well, it's especially, I like the idea of anything that's going to make people want. I like the idea of anything that's going to bring people here. I like the idea of anything that if people get brought here because they're in the military, or maybe they're brought here by the oil industry, they came here to work in the oil patch or to work some other job, make them want to stay here, because North Dakota has a chronic labor shortage. And I don't think people understand just how much that is a cap on our ability to grow our state's economy, to diversify our state's economy. I love our commodity-based industries. I love agriculture. I love the oil and gas industry. But because those are commodity industries, they can be a bit of a roller coaster at times. And when our economy is, I don't need to tell anybody in this audience who's, lived through the past several years in North Dakota, that can be a roller coaster. But yet our ability to diversify our economy is hamstrung by the fact that a lot of times industries or businesses that might want to come here and invest, a lot of times can't find a workforce because everybody's already working. Our unemployment rate hovers around 2 or 3%. If we could bring people here, get them to want to stay here, get them to take some of these jobs, to me, that's a very, very important part of the puzzle for North Dakota. It has been for a long time. We're not breaking new grounds with this. I remember, going back, 2012, we were talking about this. We've been talking about this pretty much the entire time I've been writing. I've been writing about North Dakota politics for going on over 16 years now. We've been talking about this forever, but it really is an important part of the puzzle that we still haven't quite solved.
Yeah. And, in that, right along with that, now I believe the last time I had seen a statistic on that, Grand Forks, I believe was like 1.3 or 1.5 unemployment. So it's low throughout the state. And so it's like, okay, how do we fill these jobs? One of the things that I know that I've been interested in, I've kind of done some work on, is if you look at, and it's right along it's in the same theme with criminal justice. And that is, because essentially when somebody comes out of prison, one of the big things are, do they have a job? Do they have a place to live? And do they have some type of family structure that's going to support them? And if they have those three things, the likelihood of them going back to jail is very low. But and so with that theme, one of the things that I think would be important would be doing some types of internships. It was something I tried to do a study last time, and it passed unanimously through both houses, and then the legislative council or management just decided, hey, we're not going to study it. So, so that was kind of a bummer. But part of that internships. As far as so let's say you need welders or something like that, and they could essentially train these people so they're ready to go, and there's a cost for the employer and whatever. But I mean, nothing's really set in stone. But it was just kind of, that's why I want to do a study, in that same thing. Now I know they have like the F5 project and some of these they have some really good projects out there where they're trying to incorporate people that really want to have a second chance and get back in there and working. And, what better time than now when we got tons and tons of jobs to fill, I mean,
let's bring it back to because you're obviously running for re-election this year. Let's bring it back to that. Okay. If I'm a resident of District 18, and I'm not, but if I was, and I asked you, Steve, if we vote for you, give you another 4 years, what are you gonna do with it? What are your plans for the next 4 years? What are the state's pressing needs that you'd like to address as a lawmaker?
Well, I would tell you that there's a lot of problems that we have that really can be easily addressed with, easy, for the most part, common sense solutions. Like that example I just gave you with the vets. I thought that was just a common bill. Hey, why don't we just pass it? But it actually takes a lot of work to get, common sense solutions passed. One of the things I would like to do in the future has to do with is property rights. That's one of the that's where I introduced legislation that didn't pass in the House but didn't go in the Senate. But I'd like to continue. That's one thing, is I'd like to continue the fight. And with those property rights bills, one of them was what's called grandfathered properties. Essentially, what it means is are legally non-conforming. So and there's a number of them in my district, and people don't even know they're in them. But basically, what it says is, hey, the ordinance, for example, in Grand Forks, would say that if you're in one of these houses and your house is over 50% destroyed, you cannot rebuild, right? And so, well, most people don't really know that, and then, there's not a lot of houses that actually burn down these days. But as an appraiser, I have to tell that to the bank. Hey,
well, does that? Let me just pause you. Does that impact like flood zones? Because that happens a lot more. I don't want to say happens a lot more.
No, it's not really with that. It's really only has to do with the flood zone. Everything like that's the same. The other fallacy people talk about is they talk about dilapidated houses. No, building codes have to be the same. All it really has to do with is how you have a structure somewhere, and let's say it's a duplex, right? You have this duplex sitting there. It's fine. You just updated the thing. The thing looks great, but then the city comes along and changes the neighborhood zoning to R1, which is single family houses. Well, now you're legally non-conforming because you were legal when you built it, but now that's why it's called legally non-conforming. And so what happens is there's certain rules that go along with it. Now, Fargo and Bismarck essentially have already taken care of it with city ordinances where they just said, hey, you can rebuild. That's all my bill would have done, is would have copied essentially what Fargo has, what Minnesota has, or whatever. What ended up happening in that bill is it got killed in the Senate, really with the powerful lobby arm of the League of Cities, and actually the city of Grand Forks itself came and lobbied against it. And the part, maybe where I made the mistake would have been I didn't really come at it from I thought everybody would be in agreement. I didn't think this would be I thought this would sail through. I didn't think there would be the opposition, of these the cities, opposed to it, because it's like, hey, I mean, any normal person you talk to and said, hey, you buy a house, nobody told you about it, and you're sitting in this house, and all of a sudden your house burns down, and you got to go beg the city if you can rebuild your house again. I mean, person wouldn't have bought the house if they would have known that was the case. But yet you're saying we need to keep this power, and then the other part that's really annoying along with that is the fact that these, like the city of Grand Forks, for example, when they're lobbying against these bills, those very people that I'm fighting for those houses that own these legally non-conforming houses, right? Their tax dollars are going to the city so they can pay for a lobbyist to go down to Bismarck and fight against the bills. I mean, what kind of, that's, and if people kind of knew that, I think a lot of them would be, up in arms. Now, granted, there's, there's only so many legally non-conforming houses, but at the same time, if you're there, and then they'll give examples of, well, we got this crappy house over here, or this or whatever. But again, it has nothing to do with building codes. It only has to do with zoning and their essentially control they have towards it. And that's something I'm going to be working on. And I might go the route that Minnesota did. And originally Minnesota had a bill where they passed it and they said, okay, if you want to not allow somebody to rebuild, in essence, taking their property away from them, then you need to pay them for the property, right? So they had that
taking,
as the bill.
Yeah.
Which makes sense. Everybody, and I might have to come at it from that way, because then people more understand it. Definitely the legislator understands eminent domain and all that. And it's like,
right.
Well, they kind of understand, hey, if they're going to take the property, you should at least pay for it. They shouldn't just be able to zone you out of your property and then you don't get to rebuild.
Right.
That's not fair.
Yeah, like if you have like a commercial business, or even if your business is rentals, right? And then all of a sudden they just pull the carpet out from under you and say, "Oh no,
Yep.
we're going to change the rules for this area that you've been operating in for, decades, maybe. I don't know." Yeah, I mean that's an interesting thing. Something struck me, and this will be my last question because I'm so thankful for the time that you given me today, Steve. But do you like the politics side of things? Because I'm going to make a confession. I don't really, even though I make my living from the political side of it, right? I enjoy the policy side. I like talking about the stuff that and I think there's a lot of readers my readers and listeners or whatever that, we get down in the weeds on some of these very pragmatic areas of policy. Their eyes kind of roll back in their heads. I mean, I think they like the drama of the political battles a lot more. And listen, I get it. You don't get to govern if you don't win the election. And elections are about personalities. Elections are about philosophies and everything else. And those we know what those are. Those get ugly, and they can be very entertaining at times. They can be very frustrating at times. And I write about them a lot because you kind of have to. That's the process. But I like the policy side a heck of a lot more than I like writing about the horse race. Are you the same way? I mean, because it seems to me like you're very. I brought you on. And I tried to talk to you a little bit about being a Republican and in a place that elected Democrats for a long time, and you kind of hemmed and hawed your way through that. I'm not, which I don't say dismissively at all, but you got excited when we started talking about property rights and income taxes and everything else. That seems to be what you're drawn to.
I'm definitely more into the policy and getting those things done. But like you said, at the same time, you got to get elected. But what kind of struck me when you were saying that is what's really kind of neat about North Dakota is the citizen legislator thing. Because if you ask me, what do you do for a living? I would tell you I'm an appraiser, right? If you ask somebody from Minnesota what they do for a living and they're a legislator, I'd say they're a legislator because that's what they do. And so I look at myself more as an appraiser than I do as a representative. And when you said that, I'm kind of like, yeah, I really like doing that stuff, but I like getting it done, and then coming back and then getting back to my regular life and with the politics of it. Yeah, after 4 months, it's almost that's enough for me. I can get back and kind of do my thing again, and that's really what I like about the North Dakota thing. I mean. If it was a full-time legislator, to be honest with you, I know I wouldn't want to do it. I just, if that's what I had to do all the time, I like going and getting things done. I think I've proven that I've been able to do it. Like other things I realized was, my first time through is, you think it's just, you run this campaign and then it's all done and you're all happy and this is great. And then you're like, okay, well, how do I actually implement some of my ideas? And you're like, whoa, I got a whole nother campaign. I got all these other legislators out there. Now I got a campaign to get my stuff passed, and I got to go convince all those other people, or
Yeah.
at least 48 of them, to vote on or to see my way of thinking.
And then you gotta worry about the other chamber. And then you got to worry about the executive branch. What's the governor going to do once it hits his desk, right?
Yeah, there's this,
and then you got to worry about what the judicial branch is going to do if somebody were to challenge it in court. Like, is it going to stand up? Are the judges going to be on your side?
So what I would say to all that is, and you're saying, hey, why you and why should you get reelected? Well, because I've proven that I know how to go through that system.
Yeah.
I've been successful at it. And I can get these things done for people that, like I said, they're generally common sense items that you would think, hey, why doesn't this pass? But
Sure.
Somebody has to go in there, work the system, work the process, and get the stuff passed. And then, hey, I can get back to my regular life,
Well, I think that's it. And I don't think people understand there's not a lot of people out there who are going to feel a lot of sympathy for a bunch of politicians who are going to Bismarck, but North Dakota does have a part-time, unlike a lot of places. You guys don't really have staff. There's usually some interns or a few staff that mostly works for the majority minority leaders, some people like that, but the average law, like you, was just a rank and file member of the state house. You don't have a staff. You guys really don't get paid that much money. In fact, some lawmakers tell me that by the time they have to take a hiatus from their day job or their business or whatever, it's costing them money to work in the legislature. And there's some perks, and obviously you're going to spend money this cycle convincing people to send you back again. So I don't want to make it sound like you're out there digging ditches, but it's a big sacrifice in North Dakota, and honestly, I think that's an important part of the process. I think it keeps our lawmakers here grounded.
It puts a different kind of person though in office, I think, and I think it's way more important to have that kind of person in office versus a professional politician that all they really care about is, they're thinking about their votes, and they're thinking, how will this look to this, and how
I think North Dakota lawmakers,
and what will that?
I think North Dakota lawmakers are in a position because they have to have a day job. If they lose their political job, they just go back to their day job, or they go back into retirement. I guess whatever their situation is. Politicians, they're losing their paycheck. Like, I don't get reelected to Congress. I got to figure out something to do with myself. Now, most of those people usually don't have trouble finding jobs, but at the local level, I don't know. I think it's an interesting dynamic, and we could probably spend a whole nother podcast talking about it. But and maybe we will one day. I've used up enough of your time, Steve. I certainly appreciate it, and good luck this year. I'm sure we'll be talking again.
All right, thank you. And just remember, if you want to make it better, just vote for better.
Okay, good. I'm glad you worked that in. Good job. All the talk about how you were a retail politician, and then you dropped that line on us right at the end. Good job.
It's really everything that I kind of want to do, and that's why it's a good thing, because I really want to make it better. So,
all right,
and that's ultimately what I've done. So, thank you.
Thanks, Steve.